Welcome to Unfixed. This podcast explores the intersection of artificial intelligence and the institution of higher education. I am Zach Justice, Professor of Communication Studies and Director of Faculty Development.
And I'm Nik Janos, Professor of Sociology.
We are employees of Chico State, and we will discuss some of our work, but this podcast is not affiliated with Chico State, and the views expressed here are not representative of the university. Nik, here we are again, cosplaying as newscasters for another Newswire episode. How are you feeling about that?
I'm feeling great about that. Let's dig in. So the first item we want to talk about this news episode is that OpenAI is starting to venture into the underworld. Zach, I kind of feel like we're speedrunning the 1990s. We're going to talk about ads, e-commerce, porn, and the sort of rise of new social networks. So what's going on here?
Yeah, you're right. We're doing it all at once and very fast. And there's a lot of speculation. Are they revenue poor right now? Like what exactly is going on? But yeah, they're flipping every switch to increase engagement and to monetize this enormous user base that they have. Implications for higher ed. What do you think?
Well, the first one, let's just get it off, is ads. So OpenAI announced that they're testing, beta testing, basically ads for the free tiers. They claim that this is because they want to enable those free tiers to exist in the future and provide more access to more people across the world. The reports are that there's, not a whole bunch of people paying for the models and for the other tiers, but that most people, like most things on the internet, are going to default to the free tier. And so what this means is that they're testing it out where inside your chat window, there'll be relevant ads embedded in there, but not that ChatGPT is going to be like, oh, you're making spaghetti tonight. Let me tell you about this pasta brand. Like you should only use this one. It's not going to be like that, so they say, but it's going to be sort of like subtle little things that are relevant to the things you're searching for or asking about or talking about with ChatGPT, and that those will be embedded. Why does this have anything to do with higher ed, though? The short answer is that a lot of our students are using the free version, and they are going to be probably the target audience for embedded ads in their sessions. So why is that important, though, Zach?
Well, I do think that several of these items undercut the reliability and the trust factor that people have built with these technologies, especially because, as we know, a lot of people use these things as therapists or sharing sort of really intimate details of their lives, or students are sort of trying to trust this with being a study partner. And I do think that that undermines some of that credibility if you are not using an enterprise version of the tool. And even for those of us that are using the enterprise versions, okay, the ads are, like you explained, sort of sequestered and maybe not part of what we're doing, but we definitely saw a creep with Google ads from stuff that was off to the side and clearly labeled to now stuff that's indistinguishable from search results. And you have to wonder if that same thing is going to happen here.
Yeah, that same thing happened to Amazon search, right? Everything's a sponsored. You have to look really closely. Now, just to be clear, the ads won't be coming to like the EDU platform that we use in CSU. But the other thing is to think about, which is a long-running issue in the internet era, is who's the product and who's the customer and who is really in sort of the driver's seat here. Obviously, the free model with ads, you then become sort of commoditized yourself by what you feed OpenAI, helps them generate ad revenue. Of course, you get the benefit of using this thing for free, the top models for free. But again, you sort of become the product, much like we saw with social media and Google search and things like that. And I think at an educational institution, we don't want, or we would probably caution our students from engaging in that if we're asking them to use the models directly, right?
Right. And one thing that Nik and I have talked about offline is our students have a very different relationship with privacy than people from our generation do.
Yeah.
But this does just sort of like recolor the whole experience. Before we move on to the next item, though, we have to address ChatGPT rolling out a not safe for work content, and then the sort of related story of this blow up with Grok and a bunch of stuff on Twitter and people utilizing the model to do really inappropriate things with users. Um, I think it just adds another dark layer to this. And maybe the 90s are a preview of this. Nick and I dug out this awesome article we'll link in the show notes from Harvard from 1994, where they discovered that students were looking at porn on their networks and downloading it onto their computers. It's hilarious in retrospect, but you have to wonder, are we just going to do this same cycle again, or will this have a little bit of a different wrinkle?
Yeah, no, it's well, it'll be in the show notes. Highly recommend you click on that one. It is
It's
it's
hilarious.
hilarious time machine, time capsule there. Yeah, so what he's referring to there is that OpenAI last year also announced that they're going to launch adult mode in ChatGPT. This is supposed to come out in Q1 of 2026, sort of in January, February, March. There's, as I was digging into this, I think it might be coming in Q2. Who knows? They may be punting this down the line. We don't know. But the idea here with that, there would be a mode you could toggle that turns ChatGPT from "help me with my homework" to "romance me, please" kind of thing. I'm sure it's a little bit darker than that, but or more fun if that's your thing too, of course. So I think that's something that again, the only reason we're talking about this is like, of course, adults can consent to do whatever they want, but when we're using these tools in learning settings, when we're assigning them, or at least when the university is paying money for these models, it is an interesting crossover where you have different modes of engagement with a tool that wouldn't happen when you're opening your Word document, right? When you open Word, you're not
Yes.
like, hey, would you like to have the spicy word?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is the only analog is the dawn of the internet where
Yeah.
it is not just one thing. It is all the things all together all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get on to the next item. Nick, there are a ton of new models, more than I can keep track of. There was the launch of Gemini 3 and then a rapid succession of ChatGPT updates 5.1, 5.2, and we're going to get to Claude in a little bit as its own item. Are you still primarily a ChatGPT user or are you experimenting with some of these other models?
I'm pretty much a ChatGPT user, mostly because of the EDU model that we get through the university here, and also just because I'm kind of like that with my brands. I just have one that's sort of the thing I use, and I just stick to it usually. But my New Year's resolution is to try more models. I do use Notebook LM though as well.
Right, right. Yeah, so these new models, if you're not familiar, come with new capabilities in virtually every domain, right? They are better at creating images. They are better at writing computer code. They are better at speech and voice recognition. And a lot of them are now natively multimodal. And what that
Mm.
means is you're slipping back and forth in between video, image, and text at all times. You're speaking something out loud and asking for an image, and then it's producing that image. And that's a far cry. When we first started writing about this, Nick, like DALL-E was a separate thing that we would go to outside of ChatGPT, even though it was in the OpenAI ecosystem. So it's under discussed, but having all those things sort of together in these cutting edge models makes a much more seamless experience for the user.
For sure. At the same time, I would say that it probably is confusing to people who aren't as plugged in as you and I, Zach, and people like us who are on the sort of leading edge of these technologies. And I think that there is a sort of like, burden, a cognitive burden when these companies are releasing their new products, which are just sometimes branding. I mean, there are things under the hood, absolutely, but for the casual user or the novice user or the general user, you're not going to really know the difference between 5.2 and 5.1, right? You know what I mean? And I think that is the pace of the change here is something we have to appreciate anytime we talk to people, anytime we're all, you're working with faculty and colleagues, because faster than anything. It's as if like a new iPhone came out every 4 months or something like that.
Don't give them new ideas, Nick. They
Yeah,
will
okay.
do that. And you will buy it.
Yeah.
I do want to make a quick higher ed connection here, and it goes back to something that Nick and I have made the point several times about faculty and folks who think that they know AI writing when they see it. There are three cutting edge frontier models with Gemini, OpenAI, and Claude. There are like 100 of these Chinese open source models that are just on the heels. There's Menstrual, there's Grok. There are a bunch of these things, and there are things that people are training locally. So I understand you may think that ChatGPT has some sort of verbal tics that you see when it's on the page. No one on Earth has gone through all of these Chinese models or understands the syntax of Grok, right? Like, bro, you have not put in the time to do that kind of stuff. I don't even think it's possible. So, yeah, when people say, I know it when I see it, what they really mean is I'm good at spotting people who are bad at using ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's a point we've raised before. It's not necessarily time to go on a tangent for that, but I think it's really important in the context of all the new models and the companies that are out there, is to keep that in mind. And I saw someone, making the point that because these models are trained on human writing, let's not forget the foundation of the quote unquote knowledge of all of these models is human beings and human output of writing and speaking. They are absorbing the collective tics of some of the greatest and most prolific writers of the last 100 years, right? And some of those tics are common things like M dashes or the classic "it's not Y, it's X." And those are actual rhetorical devices that people have been using for decades, if not centuries. So, and then these models, like we've said, are proliferating. They're releasing them, and the capabilities are only increasing. Not sure where the plateau will be, but let's get to item three, which is really about a new frontier, which I think that the company Anthropic is at probably the forefront right now, and that is over agents. So Anthropic has the product Claude, and they have for a while now had a product called Claude Code, which is essentially what they call a vibe coding software, where you use natural written language, or in our case here for most people in English, to type in what you want, and then the LLM translates that into computer code and writes scripts and programs the programming logic and can develop apps, UI, whatever it is that the coder is trying to do. So that's been very popular for coders around the world. Very popular as a sort of side coworker and doing a lot of that heavy lifting. Now, Anthropic has released what they call Claude Cowork. And this is a product that is actually aimed for a more broad mainstream audience. It's currently in research preview to subscribers of their $100 per month plan. You also have to have a Mac. It's not on any other platform. But real quickly, I want to say this here real quickly. What it is you give the Claude Cowork access to folders on your Mac, on your computer. When you enable the permission for it to look in and manipulate files and folders, it can then begin to act on the instructions that you give it in complex and very long chained ways, but also semi-autonomously in the background, because now it is part of your file system. It's doing the work that you would do with all those files, but without your oversight and control.
In some ways, Claude Code was a branding problem, as these as these
Yeah.
labs oftentimes have, because everything on your computer is run by code, right? So
Hmm.
when they say Claude Code, what that really means is Claude, everything that you do on your computer, right?
Yeah.
And so it allows you to spin up applications or provide instructions. One of the higher ed connections, we're close to the reality, Nick, that we talked about in the agents episode,
Hmm.
wherein we're not talking about, hey, Claude, write this paper for me. It is, hey, Claude, take this course for me.
Hmm.
And that's how I described it to a colleague earlier in the week when I was trying to press upon them the importance of this and why we need to do some kicking around as a campus to figure out some of these capabilities, is that this is not a do this task. It is, here's a set of things, learn, work independently for hours, sometimes days at a time. Ping me when I need to come in and make a decision.
Yeah.
It is a pretty substantial step forward, not the kind of thing that we have really been exposed to before. It's
Yeah.
not just a new model and a new capability. It really does seem to be we're turning over a new leaf here.
Yeah, let me add a comment on that. But before that, I just wanted to say in the show notes, there'll be a link to the AI Daily Brief, which is a pretty amazing podcast. Every day, the host takes you through the biggest stories. It's not higher ed focused, but if you want to keep a beat on all the changes in AI space, the AI Daily Brief is it. He has a great rundown of the Claude Codework release and what it means. But currently, what would this look like for a student? So I know this is a higher ed focused podcast. So what would it look like? Well, a student would, at this point, I think, have to download all of your course material into, let's say, a folder or a series of folders on their Mac, and then including assignment prompts and instructions, and then basically turn Claude Cowork onto that material to work through it and deliver deliverables over a set given time. And you could probably set it up where you would constantly, like every Monday, add more material and create a plan with Cowork to do that. So that is something that a very enterprising student could do at $100 a month, over a course of semester. That's like $400 or $500. There's still obviously work involved, but that's kind of what the workflow at this point would look like. It's not yet where you can just say, here's access to my login to Canvas, go for it yet.
Yet, I think is the
Yeah.
operative word there.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to pivot to our fourth item, where we're going to lean on Nick's acumen as a financial planner and investment guru. No, neither one of us has that. We're terrible at money, bad at capitalism, as we said many times. But there is a constant murmur of bubble talk, whether or not AI is a financial bubble, an intellectual bubble, etc. And so we do want to go through some of those sort of pieces and talk just real briefly about the about the higher ed implications. I do want to remind folks that financial markets are not reality. A huge chunk of even Americans are not personally invested in the stock market. But these companies, they need money. They are hungry for cash. And so they have to constantly display new capabilities, raise new rounds of funding, etc. So we're going to do this with a little mini game. Nick and I both started our careers in the shadow of the Great Recession. So I think we're both kind of risk averse about financial markets and those sort of things. So, Nick, I'm going to introduce a set of terms to you, and you're going to rank those terms on a scale of 1 to 5 Lehman Brothers, with the more Lehman Brothers being the more panicked it makes you feel about these kind of things as financial instruments or items. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready.
Nick, your first term is vendor financing, and this is where someone loans you money to buy something from them. So, like NVIDIA loans Anthropic money to buy NVIDIA GPUs. Nick, how many Lehman Brothers are you ranking this?
I'm going to go probably a one because this happens all the time. I mean, there's a whole market for this in consumer goods, right? You don't buy your iPhone, you buy it with a 0% loan through Apple, and then you pay it off over 2 years. There's the company Affirm. It's definitely has risk, certainly has risk, but it has risk at the individual level, at the global level, with the macro level. I'm going to say it's a one Lehman Brother. It makes me nervous, but I'm not anywhere near
You're not
panicky on this one.
panicky.
Not on this one.
Okay. Our second item is all of these labs betting on, quote, unprecedented growth in revenue.
I'm going to give this one a three because this is where I'm scared because I know revenue growth is this is how Amazon got so big is they didn't focus on profits, they focused on revenue and they grew to a behemoth. They kept their profit margins very low, but then they were able to dominate markets because they could just spend revenue on capturing new markets and growing and growing. It can really pay off that strategy, obviously. Whereas other companies, I'll just familiar with Apple, they're heavily focused on profit, and the profit has to be in line with what they can actually deliver. And so, but these companies like OpenAI, um, they're struggling with all of it at this point, right? They're kind of like these startup companies, but instead of the Web point or 2.0 and that era, these companies have major infrastructural financial costs that are not just like three guys in a garage, ordering pizzas, developing the next cool app, right? This is real sinking capital into high risk infrastructure that even Satya Nadella said, if we don't find, he just recently said, if we don't find a good use for AI, it's going to be hard to justify the infrastructure costs, not only just in money, but also to citizens and people who are bearing the burden of that. So that's a 3 for me on that one.
Yeah, one additional note, in an early interview, Sam Altman was asked about how are you going to make money? How is this? And he was like, well, you build super intelligence and then you ask it how to make the money. It's like, I don't know. I don't like that business plan.
No.
Um, okay, our third item, this relates to the sort of capital starved ventures. Nick, for many of these giant labs, the only remaining capital markets are the sovereign wealth funds of Gulf states.
Yeah, I'm gonna give this.
How do we feel about this?
I'm gonna give this one a 4.
Yeah.
Alarm bells are really ringing here. Yes, just for all the different reasons between geopolitical situations with the sovereign wealth funds of the Gulf states, the tied to now the oil economy, to unsustainable political capital, because these are company these are this is capital that comes with strings, political strings. And it's not generated through the good old fashioned of, you make products, sell product, get revenue, take a profit, reinvest model, which I know that's capitalism for all its faults, but that's kind of like, has worked in many cases, right? Yeah.
And our last item, no context for this one, just the term novel financial instruments.
This is a solid 5 Lehman Brothers, brother. I am trembling in my boots. Novel financial instruments. If you didn't live through the Great Recession, go look it up.
Oh,
We're in trouble.
yeah. When I first heard that term, I was just like, oh no, what? We did this. We already did this. It's not
Yeah.
great.
No. Okay, I do want to make a point here and connect it back to item 1, and that I also want to give a shout out to the AI Daily Brief again. One of the recent episode at the time of recording here is about the ads in ChatGPT. And for all of the, especially for Gen X, for everybody who hates advertisements, and every generation newer than us, ads kind of suck, right? But they are the way that the whole internet is funded. All the great things, that's how newspapers were funded, that's how TV was funded, that's how magazines. He makes a really good point that actually advertisements on ChatGPT might be the best news we've had in a long time, because it avoids this list here.
Right.
Develops a sustainable revenue stream that if he says they follow the Meta playbook and they get about $35 per average user, they could get up to $5 to $6 to $7 billion in ad revenue, which would fund the company in many of its ventures and create a solvent company that actually has, a revenue stream.
Yeah, the the money has to come from somewhere
Yeah.
if you're gonna do these things. And I'm not sure they should be building at this scale or anything like that. That's way beyond the scope of this podcast. The one connection to higher ed that I just want to make real briefly before we go on to the next item is that if there is some bubble activity, if this bursts, if some of these businesses go out, it becomes more difficult to have these conversations on campus because oftentimes we do perceive markets as reality. And if OpenAI isn't a business that exists in 2 years, right, then how does that change the conversations that we're trying to have on campus? The technology is not going to go away, but some of these businesses probably are.
Yeah.
And there is some real perception management that we're going to have to do on college campuses to help people understand that just because some of these things are failing, then doesn't mean that we get to revert to teaching and learning circa 2018.
Mm-hmm.
All
Absolutely.
right, Nick, we're behind on time.
Okay, item 5. So this was news to me until Zach pointed it out, but apparently Google and Canvas, the company that owns and operates Canvas, and Structure, have reached an agreement to integrate a Gemini LTI plugin into Canvas. This would put, if campuses enable it and instructors enable it, this would give a Gemini model straight into Canvas that instructors could use to streamline lesson planning right there in Canvas, generate content, save time using the AI tools right there inside Canvas, not in a third-party app or browser. And that's something we had talked about before on the podcast when we were talking about if we're going to use these tools, both for teaching and for students, having them right there in your learning management system might actually be the better way to go. But for students, this is where it gets a little sketchy. It says they'll have access to assistance right there in Canvas. They'll have personal learning capabilities that they can do. It says it'll enhance their creativity and all this other kind of stuff, right? So that's where I'm still unsure. Like, what does that look like? How would they use it? And why not just say, write this paper for me?
Right. And this direction makes me nervous. It also makes me think, well, if we could have it inside a managed ecosystem, maybe it's easier to put some guardrails on it.
Hmm.
So I'm of two minds about this, and but I do think there is one larger point. Nick, I think we were right in our prediction early on that vendor lock-in is so much more of a prize for these companies than any dollar amount that they're generating from higher ed, right? Like they are piling in sometimes at relatively low cost or no cost to get access to the eyeballs of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds because they want those people to be stuck on those tools and be the version of you that's locked into brands for like 20 years. So
Exactly. Okay, so that rounds out our news, but we do have one more thing. It's time for irresponsible speculation. Zach, what's a big story right now that actually does not matter?
okay, so I have been kind of hot on this for a while, and I had a conversation recently with administrator in engineering. I think the hot story right now, this is a big 60 Minutes episode recently that is absolute nonsense, is humanoid robots.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of absurd because humans are incredibly complex and our bodies don't work great for a bunch of things that we need to do, but we build the world around our bodies. When what we really need to do is accomplish a set of tasks, right? So, like, I have a robot vacuum in my house, but it is not a humanoid robot that gets our upright vacuum and uses it. It's just a little vacuum that I set to go around and vacuum up dog hair every time I leave for work.
Mm-hmm.
And it just zooms around on the carpet and tile and sucks up fur. I think that robotics is going to have a moment here with AI, but it's going to revolve around robots doing tasks, not creating humanoid robots that do all the things that humans do. That just seems absurdly complicated.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. It's a great spot. And I think there's some other fundamental problems, especially around what's known as the uncanny valley problem in robotics, where the humanoid robot is human-like, but not human enough that humans accept it. And there's this uncanny valley where it sits in there and it's kind of freaky or disturbing. And I had the last fall, there was a big splash when the company announced Neo, the humanoid robot that would, help clean your house and be your companion around the house. And the thing looks creepy, and it became a meme-worthy thing where like Neo's waking you up in the morning, staring at you with its little button eyes, and people would Photoshop like knives in its hand. Is like, I'm here for you today, or whatever. So every time I show my daughter the picture of Neo, she screams and runs. And
Right.
it's kind of play acting, but at the same time, it's disturbing to her. It doesn't look
Yes.
right.
Yeah, if we want consumers to do these things and if we want higher educations to do these things, right? Like nobody's unnerved by my vacuum robot,
Yeah.
right? Nobody comes to my and they're like, "Oh my God, get that out of here. That thing's satanic," right? But, if I had a humanoid robot that was using my upright vac, that's unsettling.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the last point is that this was so fake though, because it required you could buy this thing now for $500, but it
It's
requires that
remote
it's
controlled.
remote control. There's a human
Yes.
being remote controlling the robot with video eyes into your house, doing most of all the things they said it should be able to do.
Yeah,
So
I've heard that CEO talk about that what this really is about is data collection because they don't have enough about whatever. And I'm just thinking these are just such weird and awkward workarounds when you could just like build a robot to do a task.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everybody. That was our second Newswire episode. Very fun.
Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. You can find our writing on meltsintoair.org and connect with us on Blue Sky at meltsintoair.bsky.social and on LinkedIn, Zach Justice and Nik Janos. Find these links and more in the show notes. If you have feedback or want to share an idea, email us at unfixed@meltsintoair.org. Thank you to Jamie Gunderson for producing and editing the show.